I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Hope all is going well. It is Friday and we are talking NFC receiving groups, the top receiving groups. So that should be a lot of fun. But Dennis, while we were away, Aaron Rodgers finally decided to make a decision, get off the pot. He is not retiring. He flew to Pittsburgh, signing a one-year deal, and will participate in mandatory minicamp. I'm relieved it's over. I still don't think it helps the Steelers that much, but does it get you excited?
No. I mean, he looked pretty shot. Let's see. What did we both had the Steelers at 15 when we ranked the quarterback rooms, and I think we were taking Rodgers into consideration there. I don't think I'm moving him up. Maybe over Daniel Jones and the Colts. But I don't know. He didn't look like he had a ton left in the tank.
I mean, his numbers and stuff weren't terrible, I guess, but it is curious. I don't know what to make of this move, or if it's even going to be good for the Steelers. They feel like they have some other problems. He also feels like he's been on a weird, what's the opposite of a publicity tour, making some controversial comments and political comments that, I'm sure a team like Pittsburgh really doesn't want. Like, interesting comments today from Antonio Brown that said Aaron Rodgers reached out to him to see if he was interested in coming back to the Steelers. I don't know if I buy it, but that kind of circus feels like it's antithetical to what Mike Tomlin wants in Pittsburgh. There was already some light chiding and media reports about Mason Rudolph, and I can't remember who the other Steeler was that went to like a Donald Trump rally. So this Mike Tomlin doesn't like a circus, and that is allegedly one of the reasons that they pushed George Pickens out. And I don't know how to reconcile that with Aaron Rodgers, who feels like his entire life has become a circus at this point.
I think he'll be productive if they protect him. He doesn't have the mobility he used to have. He used to really excel getting out and moving and letting his guys do stuff. He's also a guy that has historically taken some time to develop chemistry with receivers, and he's not going to get that much time. He's going to have some time, and what's he got?
Supposedly he's been working with DK Metcalf, so that's interesting, but it feels like even more so now Pittsburgh's receiving room is not complete, because it's a little hard to imagine they're just going to roll with Robert Woods as wide receiver 2 in 2025. This isn't 2019.
The one thing Rodgers will do is he'll force feed a receiver.
Yeah.
And DK Metcalf is 6'4" and 235 pounds with 4.3 speed. That's a pretty good receiver to force feed. So he could be in for a career year. Does that mean that the Steelers are going to win 13 games? Nobody's going to be surprised if they're 9-8 again this year.
That's the thing, they've been 9-10. They won 10 games last year with the combination of Wilson and Fields. I don't think this team is necessarily better, and they certainly don't have an easier schedule. They play the NFC North, which means you're getting a potentially improved Chicago team, pretty good Green Bay team, pretty good Detroit team. I know they opened week 1 on the road in New York against the Jets. I think Justin Fields is going to be motivated. And honestly, I think the Jets might have a better team. They certainly have a better running back room. I think now with Pickens having moved on in the state that it is, they have a better receiving group because I like Mason Taylor. I like Garrett Wilson. We'll talk about AFC receiving groups next week, but I think this is going to be tough. Baltimore and Cincinnati are no pushovers, and even Cleveland has some talented players and a good coach. I think this could be a rough go.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wish players would recognize that the end is here, not just near.
Well, I mean, arguably, you had a better supporting cast with the Jets last year, and they won, 5 games? So, not optimistic. Other quarterback news, we didn't talk about it on Tuesday, but CJ Stroud has been dealing with a little shoulder soreness. Texans coaching staff seemingly not too worried about that. Anthony Richardson now dealing with shoulder soreness that keeps him out of minicamp. Shane Steichen, on the other hand, seemed somewhat alarmed about that, a guy who's had an injury history, including a shoulder injury history, and who's fighting for his job against Daniel Jones. Do either of these cause you concern if they're on your fantasy roster?
I'm a little less concerned about CJ Stroud, though it is alarming. He had a great rookie year, not as good last year. Now he's a little banged up. Anthony Richardson, I guess it was questionable. Like, was he going to really be able to beat out Daniel Jones? I don't think it was one of those situations where they're like, we spent a first round draft pick on him, or high first round draft pick. We really want him to beat out this retread reclamation project, but he probably wasn't gonna. He was gonna split time at best and end up probably going with the hot hand and seeing if one of them gets hot. But Richardson needs reps. He needs a lot of reps. If I have to, I'm less worried about CJ Stroud missing some OTA practices and being able to step in and execute his offense than I am about Anthony Richardson. Richardson needs all the reps that he can get, and not being able to throw the ball is really detrimental to his progress. I talked a couple years ago, I had some teams that were rebuilding that I knew were going to be a couple years out, and I had the 101. And so I traded down from 101 to 102 because I just didn't want Bijan Robinson going to waste on my team while I was trying to rebuild. And so I traded from 101 to 102 to take Anthony Richardson. Those don't look like that. Those may replace my Alvin Kamara trades.
Yeah. I mean, Richardson, we saw such a seemingly encouraging, albeit small, sample size in his rookie year, but he looked really bad last year. And, if ever there was somebody that needed kind of that off-season work, it's probably him. And that is concerning to me. I'm with you. CJ Stroud has had 2 strong professional seasons. He's been in the playoffs both season. I'm not sure that he is somebody that needs much out of OTA reps. It would be nice to develop some, some chemistry with his rookie wide receivers, but his top guy is back. and I think they'll have plenty of time to work on that. That one, I feel, very much like the coach. I'm not as concerned about that one, but it's definitely concerning Anthony Richardson and missing all this time and um, what that's going to mean. So
Yeah, if he misses the next 4 or 5 weeks, I think you could probably, consider him done for the year. Like, I don't think Daniel Jones could very well faceplant, but I would assume that if Richardson's out into July, end of July, then I think we end up seeing a whole heap and serving a Daniel Jones in Indianapolis.
yeah, so we'll have to see. The only other piece of news: Rashad Bateman got another contract, extension, another pretty lucrative deal. He hasn't put up huge numbers for fantasy, probably not the numbers we may have thought, but good for him, right?
I'm going to hire Rashad Bateman's agent. I mean, that dude is phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's a good, solid receiver, and then to get an extension, and then now to get 3 years, $36 million. Man, I don't know. It's that team. It's like they know who their guys are. They trust them. They're going to take care of them. And Bateman is playing good, but he's good in the red zone. He's got good size. It just is. I would not have guessed he got another 3-year contract for that much money.
No, I mean, it is pretty impressive. So, I mean, you got to hand it to him. Well, that is a good segue. We are talking about our top 8 pass catching groups in the NFC. We did the first part on Tuesday, so we'll pick up at number 8. Number 8 for you is the Los Angeles Rams. On their depth chart, they have Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, and Tutu Atwell as their starting receivers. They also have Jordan Whittington, Kanata Mumfield, Xavier Smith, Cephas Jones, True Edwards, Britton Covey, Mario Williams, Drake Stoops, and Brennan Presley on the depth chart at tight end. They have the veteran Tyler Higbee. They also have Colby Parkinson. They drafted Terrence Ferguson, and they have Alan Davis, Anthony Torres, and Mark Redmond. What do you like about the Rams?
Devontae Adams should pair really, really well with Matthew Stafford. We know what Puka Nacua is. He's a separator. He's going to work the intermediates. It's a little confusing because while they do it differently, Adams and Nacua kind of work the same area of the field versus Nacua and Cooper Kupp. They kind of did the same thing in that area. I don't know. It's one of those situations where you got to trust Sean McVay. He produces fantasy relevant wide receivers. I think that they do cannibalize each other a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a back end 1 and a back end 2, and they kind of flip back and forth from week to week. Tutu Atwell coming out of the slot is like, Atwell is really the deep threat. He's the one with the speed amongst the 3, but they're also probably not going to worry too much about throwing the ball too deep. If their line can hold up, then that gives Nacua would probably be the guy I expect to run the deeper routes between him and Adams. But we talk about it with running backs like David Montgomery all the time. No, he's not going to go 90 yards, but he's going to go 15, 20, 25 a lot. The Rams passing game seems to be built to do just that. They may not go over the top for 60, 70, 80 yards, but they are going to consistently go for 20, 25 yards. And if you're doing that and you're executing, you've got two receivers with very, very good hands that are getting separation, a quarterback that can get the ball there. I don't know that I expect a whole lot out of the tight ends. You know, Parkinson and Higbee are very similar. A lot of dynasty people like Terrence Ferguson, a good athlete, good size, but he wasn't super productive in college. But at the tight end position, you're not always looking for that. You're looking more at traits than you are necessarily production. Sometimes because teams just like you see a lot of Ohio State tight ends. There's probably 8 Ohio State tight ends in the NFL, but none of them are really like super productive in college. Granted, for fantasy, they haven't been really productive in the NFL either. So that's probably not a good comparison. But no, I like Adam. I think Adams and Nakua, it wouldn't surprise me if they both had double-digit touchdowns, which it will help support them where they're not necessarily getting the big yardage. But Stafford will also force feed them both targets. So their production from a PPR standpoint, in any given game, they could combine for 15 to 20 receptions and maybe not break 200 yards between the two of them. But if they're getting 16 receptions and 3 touchdowns combined for 180 yards, that's going to be productive for fantasy for both of them.
So my number 8 is a team you had at 9, which is the Atlanta Falcons. On their roster, they have Darnell Mooney, Drake London, and Ray McLeod listed as starters. Casey Washington, Kadero Hodge, Jamal Agnew, Chris Blair, Dylan Drummond, Nick Nash, the rookie, David Sills, Makai Polk, and Jesse Matthews on the roster. At tight end, their starter is Kyle Pitts. They also have Charlie Warner, Tegan Quinterino, Felipe Franks, Nikola Kalinick, and Joshua Simon. You know, maybe old habits die hard, but I'm just not ready to give up on Pitts yet. That's one of the reasons I have them up here. He's going into year 5, and it's fair to say he hasn't maybe achieved the potential we thought he had when he got drafted. He only has that 1,000-yard season from his rookie year. But I think the talent's there. I think the potential in this offense is here. That, to me, gives this group a little bit of a boost. He's had back-to-back 600-yard-plus seasons. He's improved his touchdowns each of the last few seasons. And I feel like a bigger breakout could potentially be coming here, year 2 of this offense. They're developing their young quarterback. 2024 was definitely the breakout for Drake London. He caught 100 passes for 1,271 yards. Mooney, coming over in his first year, showed that he's a very explosive, great, solid number 2 option. I love that top 3. They don't have a lot of depth, and if there was a big injury to one of those guys, it could be brutal, but I like the potential of those 3, and that was enough for me to put them at 8.
So I, like you, am also not quite ready to give up on Pitts, but what are you willing to spend for him?
I mean, I think it depends on who you're dealing with. There are a lot of people that won't let go that he's a top 5 tight end, and I'm not willing to go there. If somebody's selling him more low end tight end 1, like in that Tucker Kraft range, I'm going to take a shot.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I'd be willing to give up. I mean, would you give a 26 first for him?
No, because the other thing is it's not 100% a given that he's back next year. So I have him. I had him at tight end 11. So I guess I actually would. Oh wait, no, that was you. Where did I have him? I had him tight end 6. I guess I had him higher than you. I think I've shifted him down a little bit when I was redoing some of these rankings. I probably feel better like in the range where you were acquiring a Dallas Goedert, a K-Dot, and an Evan Ingram. I'd probably almost rather take a shot on Dalton Kincaid because I think he's cheaper, and I still think there's some upside there. But for the right price, I would consider it. Your number 7, you went with the San Francisco 49ers. That was the team I had at 9. On their roster, they have Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings at starter. Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Watkins, Jacob Cowing, Isaiah Hodgins, Isaiah Namor, Junior Bergen, Tariq Owens, Russell Gage, and Malik Knowles on the roster. Their starting tight end is George Kittle. They also have Luke Farrell, Ross Dwelly, Braden Willis, Jake Tongs, and Mason Pline on the roster. I'm guessing it's kind of the top quartet there that sells you on the 49ers.
Very, very much so. I really like having, like, Demarcus Robinson is like one of the few wide receiver handcuffs that I would like to go out and get if I have Pearsall or Ayuk or Jennings. You know, he's a guy that I think would step right in, and I don't know if I expect that Ayuk is the top producer in this group if they're all healthy. So I don't know that Robinson would necessarily replace that if Ayuk was out again, but I could see him being, a top 40 wide receiver if one of these guys goes out. I like Pearsall a lot. I think he surprised people with his draft capital and being able to kind of deliver on that because I think he got the opportunity earlier than we expected with Debo being dinged up a little bit and Ayuk getting hurt. And then Juwan Jennings with the later breakout, he was one of those guys that for about 3 or 4 seasons, he just seemed to catch a ball here or there that made you go, oh, okay, and he would produce. And then when it came time to, like, all right, you got to step up now, he did. He's big. He's one of these 6'3", 215 pounders. Running him out of the slot is going to be phenomenal. He could still end up being super productive. Probably the biggest ding on this receiving core is a healthy Christian McCaffrey. If he's healthy, he could start to pull in another 20, 25 opportunities per game. And even if they decide, well, we're not going to give him as many carries, they could still get McCaffrey 8 or 10 targets a game. And so those got to come from somewhere. George Kittle, as much as he talks about, well, I love to block as much as I love to catch, he's super productive at the tight end. So there's 4 guys here in the receiving room, and then 5 if you're counting Robinson, that they can make stuff happen. If Kittle goes out, I don't think Farrell or Dwelly are really a threat to continue that, but I would suspect that they get 50% of the targets that George Kittle got, but then that boosts those wide receivers. So I like this room a lot. I think it's very productive. It's well-rounded. You've got a big guy, good slot guy, great route runner, Ricky Pearsall, a traditional X receiver in Brandon Ayuk, and Demarcus Robinson is your 4 that can kind of slot in at just about any of those spots.
Yeah, so my number 7 is the team you had at 8, which is the Rams. And it's really I like Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams paired together. Nacua had 79 receptions, 990 yards in just 11 games last year. And despite the dumpster fires he was on with the Raiders and the Jets, Devontae Adams, another 1,000-yard season. I like the pairing here with Matthew Stafford. I actually like their tight end group. I think Higbee and Parkinson have both had some upside, and I liked the pick of Ferguson. I thought that was an intriguing rookie pick. Meanwhile, they have role players like Atwell and Whittington that may not feel that impressive, but seem to fit with Sean McVay and what he's trying to do there. So it's just a well-rounded group, and maybe part of it is just the fit in the offense that does it for me. We have the same team at number 6, and I'm going to say, for me, it's all about the potential and upside of this group, and that is the Chicago Bears. They have DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Luther Burden III listed as their starters. They also have Devin Duvernay, Tyler Scott, Olamide Zacchaeus, Miles Boykin, Samari Torre, Maurice Alexander, John Jackson, Jade Walker, and J.P. Richardson at tight end. They drafted Colston Loveland out of Michigan. They also have Cole Kmet. They picked up Jerome Smythe, a good blocker, Stephen Carlson, and Joel Wilson. And like I said, for me, they're really all about potential. The only proven reliable performer on here is Moore, who has done it throughout his career with the Panthers and the Bears. You know, he had 98 receptions for 966 yards last year. He's appeared in all 17 games each of the past 4 seasons. He's a good, solid number one. But there is going to be plenty of competition for targets. Odunze had a quiet rookie year, could be poised to get better. I really like the pick of Burden, who was great out of Missouri. And they have 2 really interesting tight ends. I liked the Loveland pick out of Michigan, Cole Kmet. You know, we've seen him blast off at times, disappear at times. That gives them kind of a stellar top 5 options in the passing game. That's a luxury a lot of teams don't have. But how is this group going to gel together? What is it going to do in this offense? That's probably what keeps me from putting them higher.
With this group, a lot of it really comes down to what kind of step does Caleb Williams take this year? A new offense, his 3rd offense in 14 months. So it's going to be like,
I don't know if they changed offenses when they kept his passing game coordinator, went from being his passing game coordinator to being an offensive coordinator and head coach. I don't think they really changed much last year. It didn't look like they changed or made any adjustments or growth last year, certainly.
So it's, there's going to be some growing pains, but I like Caleb Williams is kind of right now, he's that sleeper darling for a lot of dynasty analysts. They're like, well, he's got Ben Johnson now. They invested all of these resources in the offensive line. They're rebuilding that. That was a big issue. He's going to be better protected. Got DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson. They're good to go with the running game. I think that I'm kind of buying into that, and Caleb Williams can throw the ball pretty well. He showed in college he could be very accurate. So, they've got receivers that can do a lot of different things. Odunze is a big down the field receiver. DJ Moore can work short to deep. Luther Burden is, that great tunnel screen guy, works short area. Plus he's got really good speed. Colston Loveland is a mismatch at tight end where Cole Kmet's a little more traditional, but still a good receiver. I think what seals it for me is Miles Boykin. I think he just really, anybody with his skill set that's still in the league, you got to give it to
him. So at your number 5, you went with the Philadelphia Eagles. On the roster for them, they have A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson, and Devonta Smith listed as their top 3 receivers. They also have Johnny Wilson, Terrace Marshall, Anais Smith, Elijah Cooks, Danny Gray, Avery Williams, Darius Cooper, Taylor Morin, Giles Jackson, and then at tight end, they have Dallas Goedert. They also have Grant Calcaterra, Kylan Granson, Harrison Bryant, Nick Muse, EJ Jenkins, and Cameron Latow. So what lands the Eagles at 5 for you?
Really, it's on the shoulders of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. They are, Devonta Smith is the wide receiver 1 on 20 other NFL teams probably. He's very productive. I like Jahan Dotson coming out of college a lot. I thought he would be a lot better than he was, but he just never quite he didn't grow past his rookie year, and now he finds himself in Philadelphia as the wide receiver 3. Goddard is just solid and reliable, and I think Calcaterra, who was the receiving tight end that followed Mark Andrews at Oklahoma, had some concussion issues in college and retired and then came back, I think at TCU or some smaller college before coming into the NFL. He's a very good pass receiver. And then you've got Johnny Wilson, who's what, 6'7". He's like the second coming of Harold Carmichael going into his second year. Anaya Smith, who needs, just he's stuck behind Devonta Smith. And unless Smith gets hurt, he's not going to get a ton of opportunity. Either Wilson or Marshall on the outside may be able to push Jahan Dotson if Dotson doesn't continue to improve. But when you've got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and then Saquon Barkley, like, really, how much opportunity share is going to be there for Jahan Dotson? I don't know, but it's really on the shoulders of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith.
So for me at 5, I went with the Cowboys. I have the Eagles at 4, so I'm going to kind of touch on them together because to me, they're very similar setups. So the Cowboys on their roster have George Pickens, Jalen Tolbert, and CeeDee Lamb listed as their top 3 receivers. They also have Jalen Brooks, Jonathan Mingo, Kavontae Turpin, Ryan Flournoy, Paris Campbell, Jalen Cropper, and Kelvin Harmon at tight end, Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Spann Ford, John Stevens Jr., and Rivaldo Fairweather, who definitely wins the name Olympics. So when I was looking at the Cowboys and the Eagles, I think they're very similar in that they have a really good top 2 receivers, a really solid tight end, and then they have a third receiver who has some potential and upside as a work in progress, and then a lot of unproven weird depth. In fact, each of these teams has a former Carolina Panther top draft pick receiver kind of as their backup. The Eagles have Terrace Marshall. The Cowboys traded for Jonathan Mingo. Lamb, for me, is the best receiver out of these teams, bar none. But when I was looking at the comparison, I'd rather have Devonta Smith than George Pickens, and I'd rather have Dallas Goedert than Jake Ferguson, with their depth being kind of a wash. That led me to give the smallest of edges to the Eagles. So I have the Eagles 4 and the Cowboys 5. Even though I think CeeDee Lamb is the best receiver on either team, it just, the way they stacked up. I'm not as big a fan of George Pickens. I think he's a head case. We've also seen him disappear at times. Maybe he seemed to be better when he was a number 2. Maybe that'll help him some here. But I think Devonta Smith, as you mentioned, is one of the better number 2 receivers in all of the league. And I still like Goddard a little bit better than Ferguson. So that was enough for me to give them the edge. At 4 for you went with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, probably the deepest team on this list. They have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and the rookie Emeka Egbuka listed as their top 3. They also have Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, who looked really good down the stretch last year, the veteran Sterling Shepard, Raheem Jarrett, Ryan Miller, the rookie Tez Johnson, Dennis Houston, Garrett Green, and Cameron Johnson on the roster at receiver. They lead tight end. Their starter is Cade Otton. They also have Payne Durham, O'Keefe, Devin Culp, and Tanner Tallulah. So why do you have them at 4?
So Baker Mayfield has a great connection with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and Emeka Egbuka is phenomenal. He's a super, super talented receiver. This team, I think, goes 8 deep as they prepare for Mike Evans' retirement and Chris Godwin getting older. Sterling Shepard, he's had a lot of injury seasons, but he's a capable slot guy. So if something were to happen and they moved Egbuka outside because Evans or Godwin went down, I like Tez Johnson, their third string slot guy. Not very big, but he was very productive in college. Give him a couple years in the NFL program. I think he's got some opportunity. Jalen McMillan looked great last year, and it was really, I have several Jalen McMillan shares that, as much as I loved Emeka Egbuka, were saddened by the drafting of Emeka Egbuka. Trey Palmer showed some promise as well, and Raheem Jarrett also had flashed a little bit. So that's 8 guys that could potentially, if something happens, play next man up. Cade Otton is a decent tight end, consistent. Payne Durham is more of a blocking tight end. If something were to happen to Cade Otton, I think O'Keefe may be the one who's the beneficiary of the receiving work, but it really comes down to the wide receiver group with this team.
Yeah, and that depth that you talk about is one of the reasons I have them as my number 3 team. I think they are the deepest team in the NFC, like you said, 7 or 8 deep, where guys you probably have rostered in fantasy. I think Cade Otton really emerged as a very solid tight end. I would say he's probably more of a top end tight end too for me, kind of in that 12 to 16 range. But he had some moments where he was the overall tight end 1 for a couple of weeks there when they needed production. Evans has been rock solid. Godwin coming back off that injury, but they certainly have depth. McMillan stepped in and looked good when he needed to. And Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson, kind of luxury picks, the rich, maybe getting richer at a position there. Your number 3, you went with the Cowboys, who I had at 5, but what makes you like them more than the Eagles and the Buccaneers?
Passing volume expectations. I just feel like they are a pass-first team, and while theoretically Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue may have improved the running game over I forget the guy that's backing up in Carolina now, but Rico
Dowdle. Yeah.
They may improve the running game. Maybe Miles Sanders helps, but to me, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are gonna get a ton of volume. And Jalen Tolbert was a guy that I was on as a potential breakout before they traded for Pickens. I like Tolbert. He looked pretty good last year after Brandon Cooks went down, and he had to take on a more prominent role. So I was really excited about that. Well, now he's moved to the wide receiver 3 role there. Jalen Brooks, Kevontae Turpin, Jonathan Mingo don't do a whole lot for me as the second 3. But that top 3 or top 2 with Pickens and Lamb, I think they're going to get, 160, 130 targets. They're going to be fed. I like Ferguson. I think he's pretty good. Luke Schoonmaker played admirably in his absence. I think they're neither one. They're like those. They're in that group of wide receivers, or tight ends from that like 8 to 20 group. But I feel like if either one of them are the starter, they're going to be in that probably 8 to 14 tight end range. With the volume this team is going to pass.
You and I have the same. We have the same 2 teams as our top 2 teams. So I'm going to give their rosters, and then you and I have a slightly different order. And that is 2 teams out of the NFC North, the Detroit Lions, who list Tim Patrick, Jamison Williams, and Amon-Ra St. Brown as their top receivers. They have Dominic Lovett, Khalif Raymond, Isaac Tesla, Malik Taylor, Ronnie Bell, Tom Kennedy on the roster. Their starting tight end, Sam Laporta. They also have Brock Wright, Shane Zylstra, Kenny Yeboah. And then the other team is the Minnesota Vikings. Their top 3 receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Jalen Naylor. They also have Tim Jones and Rondale Moore, the rookie Ty Felton, Lucky Jackson, Thayer Thomas, Silas Bolden, Joshua Jones, Dante Fleming, and Robert Lewis at tight end. They have TJ Hawkinson, followed by Josh Oliver, the rookie Gavin Bartholomew, and then Ben Urasek and Bryson Nesbitt. You have the Lions 2 and the Vikings at 1. I have the Vikings at 2, the Lions at 1. What separates these 2 for you?
I think that Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson are just slightly, each of them are a little bit better than Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. So then it comes down to, well, you got Jamison Williams versus Jordan Addison. I think those are pretty equally matched. To Tim Patrick versus Jalen Naylor. I think I might give the edge to Patrick, but maybe not. That might be a tie too, because we've seen Jalen Naylor step up when Addison has been out. Then you get Brock Wright versus Josh Oliver. It's a wash. Gavin Bartholomew versus who's the other guy?
Zylstra.
It's really each of the top 4 guys in Minnesota have just a little bit of an edge for the most part over the top 4 guys in Detroit. Isaac Tesla, he's a rookie, hasn't proven anything. Rondale Moore is a free agent. He has shown us that he can be productive in Arizona. I don't expect him to overtake Jalen Naylor by any stretch of the imagination. But if he got called on, I think he could be productive in the slot. Ty Felton's a rookie. I don't know. Detroit's got 2 rookies, a 3rd rounder and a 7th rounder in their top 6. Khalif Raymond, who's probably their 4th receiver. He's more, he does a lot of special team stuff. And, occasionally he'll make a tough catch here or there. But ultimately, I give Jefferson the edge over Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I would probably have Jefferson at 2 behind Chase and St. Brown at 4 or 5. And then I'm going to have Hawkinson over Laporta. I just think Hawkinson is a little bit more consistent than Sam Laporta. Laporta had a phenomenal rookie year, then fell off. And Hawkinson, whenever he's been healthy, has been an elite producer at tight end.
Yeah, and I kind of did the same thing. I think the depth for both teams is kind of a wash for me. Khalif Raymond, Rondale Moore, maybe interesting. There's a lot of unproven stuff behind them. Josh Oliver, I thought had a few moments last year, but we've seen Brock Wright be a solid backup. Kenny Yeboah was kind of an interesting pickup by Detroit. So I was really looking at the top 4. And while I give Justin Jefferson an edge over Amon-Ra St. Brown, I, like you, have them 2 and 4, I think is where I have them in dynasty rankings. That's where the edge ends for me for Minnesota, which is why I have them too. I think Jameson Williams, who's coming off his first 1,000-yard season last year, is better than Jordan Addison. I have him ranked higher than Jordan Addison. Tim Patrick is probably the best 3rd receiver that any of these teams have. I think it would be crazy to give Jalen Naylor the edge. I wouldn't understand that at all. And I also have Sam Laporta over TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson's been beat up of late. I like Sam Laporta a lot better. So that was an easy edge for me. And that's why I have Detroit at 1 and Minnesota at 2, even though I think, Justin Jefferson's probably the best receiver of the group. To me, it was very similar to how I was looking at the Cowboys and the Eagles when I matched them up. I like number 1 better, but I like the rest of the squad better on the other team.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, I know you're not a probably as big a fan of Patrick, but I saw him play for so many years. I think he's an incredible number 3. He's a guy that could be a starter on several of these teams, and I think it would improve them. So, well, that'll do it for us today. Looking at the NFC pass catchers, we're going to be back on Monday. And we are going to start looking at the AFC pass catching group. So, Aaron Rodgers, hopefully you'll be busy out there because you may not want to hear what I have to say about your Pittsburgh Steelers receivers. Let's just say they're decidedly going to be early in the show for me on Monday. A lot of teams, a lot of interesting receiver groups, a lot of groups that were hard for me to rank. So I'll be curious to see how we match up with our AFC groups, but that'll be what we take a look at on Monday and then Thursday next week. And then we will be taking a break the following week. We'll be out and then we'll be back for a week and then we'll be taking another week out. It's almost like it's summer and
right.
we're going to be doing these things, doing baseball, doing trips. Your team's still in search of its first win. We'll hope that they get it next Tuesday as your next game, or you have one
tomorrow. Sunday's our next game.
Sunday. So be pulling for you on Sunday. We'll get the full report on Monday. But if you're out there watching batting practice, waiting for a game to kick off, Dennis, what can the people do to fill that time?
Well, before we duck on out of here, I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the loss of one of the guys in the industry who's been around a while, Anthony Servino, the real NFL guru. We were on the with Scott Adkins when we first joined a network. I forget what network it was. Man, getting old sucks. But his show with Michael Hoff was on the same network when we first started. Jim Day was running it, or not Jim Day. Maybe it was Jim Day. Anyways, the real NFL guru, Anthony Servino, passed a couple days ago. It was unexpected. He was a fairly young guy. And, while I don't think either of us really knew him well, other than him being across our feed and on Twitter and whatnot, there's some stuff out there, some ways that you can help his family. That'll never replace the loss of a loved one. But, I just want to say that, here at the Fantasy Football Roundtable, we're sorry for the loss to both the family and to the fantasy football community. He did a lot around mental health and did a mental health pot-a-thon that, Hayden Hurst supported. He did a lot of, he uplifted a lot of people in the industry and, was always willing to stick his hand out. So, I just want to wish the family and those that were close to him all the best from us. That being said, if you got a minute, go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like, leave us a rating and a review.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll be pulling for your baseball team on Sunday. Until then, we will see you guys on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.